There are moments when an incident exposes something deeper about a country, and the knife attack on the Doncaster-to-London train earlier this month did exactly that. The shock was immediate, but what came next was even more revealing. Calls for more cameras, better monitoring, and expanded facial recognition systems across the UK's transport network. For many people, this reaction felt expected, as if Britain's answer to insecurity has quietly settled into a single default setting. Yet behind the push for more surveillance lies a much larger story about how the country has evolved into one of the most heavily watched societies outside China, and what this transformation really costs in terms of privacy, freedom, and public trust. The government's response reflected this shift. The Transport Secretary signaled intentions to upgrade CCTV in major stations and initiate a consultation process to expand the use of facial recognition tools. Even the political opposition has leaned toward normalizing these systems, with senior figures supporting the routine deployment of live facial recognition in crime-dense areas. On the surface, these proposals appear to be sensible security measures, especially when framed against public concern and rising anxieties about violent incidents. But as the demand for surveillance grows, it becomes worth asking whether the spread of cameras actually prevents crime, or whether their presence simply reassures people without delivering measurable results. This tension between perception and evidence sits at the core of Britain's ongoing experiment with widespread monitoring. Recent estimates suggest nearly 1 million private and public CCTV cameras now operate in London alone. That equates to roughly 1 camera for every 10 people, or about 1,500 cameras per square mile, numbers that place the UK among the most surveilled democracies in the world. A simple walk from a tube station to an office might result in a person being recorded hundreds of times. Ironically, while the UK has embraced constant visibility, many of the devices overseeing its streets are manufactured by Chinese firms, a point that adds another layer to the debate about technological dependence and foreign-produced surveillance infrastructure. The expansion is continuing as well, with police forces rolling out new facial recognition vans across at least 7 regions, deepening the sense that daily movement is monitored in increasingly sophisticated ways. Government officials argue that images of passers-by are automatically deleted, presenting this as a safeguard for civil liberties. But civil rights campaigners, such as those at Big Brother Watch, warn that the system has grown too large and too fast, describing it as essentially unregulated. Understanding how Britain reached this point requires looking back. In the late 1960s, cameras were mostly confined to retailers fighting shoplifting. By the 1970s, early systems appeared in the London Underground and on major roads. Even in the mid-1980s, public cameras outside London were rare. Within 2 decades, however, that landscape changed dramatically. By the mid-2000s, camera numbers had surged into the millions. In 2022, an industry report estimated 21 million cameras across Britain, though this included everything from doorbells to GoPros. A more grounded estimate suggested 7.5 million actual surveillance devices, still roughly 1 for every 10 residents. What has changed most is not just the number of cameras, but public attitudes toward them. A good example comes from a community in Didsbury Park, a peaceful area in South Manchester. Years ago, local residents rejected the idea of installing cameras because they viewed them as intrusive and feared the erosion of civil liberties. But vandalism persisted, and the pressure on volunteers who maintained the park only increased. After a series of damaging incidents, including repeated break-ins, local leaders revisited the idea. They found that over time, resistance had weakened. People had grown accustomed to being filmed by doorbells, dashcams, and phones. when the community finally applied for council funding to install CCTV, far fewer objections were raised. In the years that followed, the community used the footage not only to monitor suspicious activity, but also as an educational tool in schools to discourage antisocial behavior. Civil liberties groups argue that while responsible individuals may treat surveillance footage with care, others may not. The Information Commissioner's Office offers guidance on how image data should be handled, but much of this guidance is under review, inconsistently followed, or poorly enforced. With commuters being captured hundreds of times a day, it is unrealistic to expect each organization possessing footage to fully comply. Complaints must be initiated by individuals, and enforcement is often slow. This leads campaigners to argue that surveillance norms have outpaced regulatory oversight. The rise of easily installed consumer devices, doorbell cameras angled toward public streets, for example, has blurred the line between private monitoring and public surveillance. Technically, some of these uses fall under data protection laws, but in practice, the system largely runs on voluntary compliance. The rapid growth of mobile CCTV has also changed the security landscape. Companies like WCCTV, founded in 2001, expanded rapidly as soon as cameras could operate through mobile networks rather than fixed wiring. This allowed cameras to be repositioned quickly to respond to crime patterns, contributing to a dramatic rise in demand from local councils, construction sites, transportation hubs, and private businesses. Modern systems now use cloud-based tools capable of identifying behavioral patterns such as loitering. While this raises concerns about algorithmic profiling, companies emphasize that these tools serve two main purposes: deterrence and evidence gathering. They argue that communities often feel safer knowing that cameras can help secure prosecutions, particularly at a time when antisocial behavior and disregard for authority appear to be increasing. But the core question remains: do cameras actually reduce crime? Evidence is inconsistent. Former government experts have acknowledged that decades of surveillance data offer little proof that cameras significantly deter criminal activity. What they do appear to aid is the police response after an incident, particularly in identifying suspects and building cases. In fact, where police have tracked outcomes, a meaningful percentage of successful prosecutions involved some form of CCTV evidence. However, this does not necessarily justify the ever-expanding presence of such systems, especially when combined with emerging tools like drones or automated facial recognition. Concerns deepened after a high-profile case in which a man was mistakenly flagged by facial recognition software and detained. This incident has since prompted a judicial review scheduled for 2026. Government officials argue that existing laws already require surveillance systems, including facial recognition, to comply with safeguards, and they point to consultations aimed at developing a clearer legal framework. Supporters highlight instances where live facial recognition has led to the arrest of wanted individuals, including serious offenders, but the broader debate is far from settled. For many communities, cameras have become part of daily life, offering reassurance and sometimes reducing local disorder. Yet on a national scale, the UK's embrace of pervasive monitoring leaves open critical questions about privacy, accuracy, regulation, and the long-term impact of normalizing constant observation. As Britain continues down this path, the challenge will be determining whether these tools genuinely enhance safety or whether they slowly reshape society in ways that are harder to see than the cameras themselves.